Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Soccer Queens podcast. Today, we have another fantastic guest who I have known for a little while now. I connected with her, I think, last year through some of our network in the youth long term athletic development space. So, this is going to be super fun. But I'm going to give a bio of our amazing guest today. So, Dr. Amanda Stanek was born and raised in Nova Scotia, Canada, where she attended and played soccer for St. Francis Xavier University. So, fellow soccer player, super exciting. Through these years, she developed a strong work ethic to accompany her active lifestyle, physical activities, and positive outlook on life. Upon moving to the US, she attended Virginia Commonwealth University, where she attained a Master of Science with an emphasis in physical education and sports psychology. Completely devoted to her field, she enrolled in a PhD program in kinesiology within the Curry School of Education at the University of Virginia, where she was recognized as the outstanding doctoral student in her graduating year. Further achievements include the publication of more than 20 articles, as well as co-authoring several book chapters related to physical education, sport, health, and wellness topics. So, if there's anyone I'm going to bring on the show and talk to about youth physical development and empowering our youth, as well as touching on physical literacy in the schools, it is Amanda. So, Amanda, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Erica. As you know, I'm a huge fan of yours, and it's really an honor to be invited to speak with you today.
I'm so ready, and I was just so grateful to have met you obviously on Twitter. It's just such an amazing time to connect with other great people in this space, but I was also really lucky to meet you when you came down to Florida for the field hockey tournament. And when I met you, I was like, wow, she is just all about youth and bringing back the joy in sports. And I just could feel that energy from you. And it was just so amazing. We got to spend that time together. So let's just get started with bringing back the joy in sports and part of what your mission is with the work you do with Move Live Learn and the company you founded.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really sad when we think that fun and joy are bad words, particularly in sport. When the research could not be more clear, the number one reason kids play sport is to have fun. And the number one reason they quit is when it's no longer fun. And so in the past several years, have been just really consumed with this idea of how can we protect the joy of sport. Now, when I say that, sometimes people think that I mean there's no room for kids to struggle with sport. And I'm not saying that. I don't know any of us who didn't learn valuable lessons from when we either failed to achieve a goal or fell short of something, or had felt like there was an extra hurdle that we had to hop over in sport. That yes, we can learn things from that, but resilience doesn't come from uncontrolled, unpredictable environments. Resilience is built from very predictable and very controlled environments. And so what I'm talking about is really helping to create a culture that is joyful. That means competing hard becomes part of the joy, right? That means doing our best is joyful. That means improving and working, like the journey is joyful. And so that is really where I am talking mostly these days, and where my writing has taken me mostly these days. And as you know, I'm working on a book about this with that title, Protect the Joy, a positive collaborative approach to youth sport. And it is just strategies from education and teachers that really work to create this environment where kids want to do their best and they can find the joy in the struggle of doing their best and improving.
Wow, there's so much to just unpack here. So the first thing, and I love that you touched on this, was a lot of people assume you're just talking about, oh, there's no competition or adversity, and that's I don't think I've ever heard you say that. You're just focusing on just bringing the joy back, and part of that is competition, and it can be fun. And I love that you just clarify that because people on Twitter just take everything out of context,
But
but it
I think too, as when you're a woman and you're saying that, and you're a teacher in your heart when you're saying that, but when you look at any championship team, and you listen to the participants talk about what made that team special, it's always about relationships and the joy in the journey and the competing. So I don't even know why people would assume that I don't mean those things, especially if you know me. I mean, clearly I'm a worker, right? Like it's not that I'm just sitting back and everything's handed to me. I love the journey of the work, if you will. But yeah, thank you for highlighting that point.
That's so true, and all these high level teams are the ones who look back and they're very fond of the memories, and we could look at people who made it to college or professional or even young athletes who just played throughout high school, and they're like, wow, high school sports were just so much fun. And it's really cool that you can do it all. You can have the joy, but you can also get better as an athlete and as a player. But where do you think the joy is being lost? Like what are like some of these environments that are being created that are sucking it, and kids are ending up quitting by age 13 or age 12?
Yeah, I think every kid's situation is different, which is another point that I'd like to bring up today that Twitter really misses. Uh, these blanket statements, coaches don't know anything or parents don't know anything, like none of that is true. Some parents are unreasonable, but let's not talk and preach to the lowest common denominator of parent out there. Some are extremely thoughtful and want a well-rounded, just hardworking, caring child. Speaking, example A, and then there are some who are completely, they're biased and they can't get out of that. And then there's some coaches where you're just like, why do you ever have to leave my child? You're the most amazing human being. How lucky are they to have you? And then 2 months later, it might be a situation where you're like, oh my gosh, like this is not a healthy environment for any young child or adolescent to be in. So I think when I say where I think it's breaking down, it really is not meant to be generalized as blanket statements. It's like specific statements that people have shared with me. I hear from probably 4 or 5. It's almost always mothers a week, with various situations. The number, a really one that comes up a lot is the culture of the families in the team. It's almost a race to be who on top within the team, rather than the primary goal to be develop everyone to benefit the team. That's really, I think at these higher, I know in soccer, ECNL, like these things are, this is sometimes a reality, right? In all sports. So it's like, how can I give my kid an advantage? And it becomes a competition within the team, not in a healthy way, not in a way that we want in a team sport to be. Another one is taking adult version of sport to children. There's so many of us, Erica, that played college sport that, you're so brilliant with these adolescent girls. Like you're able to reflect and you realize they're not 20, they're not playing at Hopkins like you did. They might have different goals, but they're younger. And so using adult version of sport on these young adolescent brains with really hormones charging, it's really detrimental and a huge cause of sucking the joy from the sport. That might come in terms of, really benching kids at a really young age in a totally inconsequential situation. It comes from not communicating clearly with kids. So yes, maybe playing time is not as much as others, but there's no courage to look these kids in the eye and tell them why. They say, okay, we don't want to hear from parents. I've heard from families, they role play with their kids to go communicate with the coach, and the response is, If you ever complain or question my decisions about your playing time, you'll be benched more. You know, I don't think these coaches mean to say these things. I think sometimes they're caught off guard, but I think there's a few things we can do to help protect that joy. So if we encourage our children to go and speak to the coach, just shoot the coach an email and give the coach a heads up. Say, look, it's between you and so and so. I'm just giving you a heads up. They're a shy kid. They're coming. They're feeling courageous. We role played. They're going to come talk to you. I didn't want you caught off guard. I mean, that would be a really nice thing as a parent to do, so the coach can give the best self. Again, it's this, we talk about all the benefits of team. Are we not a team in helping these young people develop as great citizens?
Mhm. I'm glad we're starting to get into the playing time topic because that's been a huge debate. And I, again, to not to bring Twitter up all the time, but I have seen the playing time debates, especially for we're talking our 7 to 12-year-olds, where some people are justifying, oh, it's okay to have a 7-year-old just play 10 minutes and like to punish them. And I'm like, wait, what? So what are your thoughts on playing time? Should it be equal during those ages? When is there a point where it's like, okay, we should be playing our best people? What are your thoughts on this?
So I'm 45, and what I'm going to say now is very different than what I would have said at 25. And the reason I'm sharing that is because I want to give all of us permission to reflect and change our stance on things rather than doubling down. um, so I used to think, okay, know, ha- as long as they all like half is good, but if it's a really big championship game or something like that with that age group, then maybe some get a lot more. Um, Long-term athlete development. So two really big things that I would love for your listeners, youth coaches to really take away. People think the variance in skill and everything within a team is really great, and I would argue that it's not at all. The teams are picked based on skill and speed and agility, right? So you have your team. You should be completely dedicated to making sure everyone on that team has equal opportunity to develop. And what's happening with the playing time, what these coaches need to understand, when you're giving kids 10 minutes, you are giving them so many extra hurdles. Clearly, maybe they're not as consistent or fast or technical at that moment or tactical, but you're giving them less opportunity to practice. So now, a master's of sports psychology, now the psychological piece is coming in. So now they're playing out of fear. They're scared that their 10 minutes is going to go to 5. And I have found that coaches who do this, the kids that are getting, the 80 minutes, it is really hard for them to mess up to the point where they're now on the receiving end of 10. The coach's mind seem to be really made up. So it takes that pressure, and then no one's happy, right? You're not building a team culture. The kids aren't passing to the kid that gets benched because they don't trust them anymore. That kid's confidence goes down lower. Now you created cliques within the team. They're not playing for each other. They're playing for that 80% playing time. And you're just making your job or your volunteer position like way less fun than it ought to be. And now you've got phone calls or emails to fuel on Monday. It makes absolutely no sense to me. In math class for fourth, you're saying 7 to 12. So let's take fourth grade. That's 10 years old. You have kids, you're given both a math test. Okay. And you tell one kid, you get 10 minutes to complete this math test. You have another one, you have 80 minutes to complete it. You can make mistakes, check your work, erase it, and just do your best. It's all good. You tell the person 10 minutes. If it's not perfect, tomorrow you get 5 minutes. And so there's an urgency for them to perform, which we know what causes to our decision making. The research on the brain under pressure is very clear, particularly for the adolescent brain. We are creating it so much harder for these kids. And then we like to sit back and say, well, they're just not tough. They just can't hack it. I mean, they're 10. Like, why are you doing this? Because they're taking adult version of sport, Division 1 experiences that they had, or Division 3, I don't care what it was, U Sport in Canada, which was the league I was in, and you're now putting that model on children. It makes no sense to me. And it makes no sense with long-term athlete development. So when it's a real kicker is when you see USA soccer, USA hockey, USA field hockey, you see these sports, their coaching education level ones adhering to and wanting at the grassroots level long-term athlete development. And then at the local level, it's not happening sometimes. And sometimes it is happening beautifully. But you know, those are all my thoughts on that.
Man, I mean, you just opened a can of worms, but it breaks my heart seeing this for 8 to 10-year-olds, 11, 12-year-olds. And to your point, it's like, well, if these coaches really want them to develop technically, tactically is a big one I always hear. They have to get that playing time.
They do.
Otherwise, like, I think sometimes coaches expect, oh, well, if they're not getting it with me and my team, then they can go hire someone else. Well, maybe they don't want to. Maybe they can't. You got to put them in that environment yourself as a coach. It's really easy to do, and it's not about wins at that age. It's not. And I've seen people argue about this, especially over in Europe, who work for the youth academies. The youth academies in Europe, well, yes, fantastic players. They're producing a lot of talent and eventually they're on the pro pathway, but it's just hard when we look at it from a psychological perspective too.
Yeah, and I think we need to realize that if we want to own any podium in any sport, the key to that is numbers. And when you make it so expensive for families, or when you make it so that it's only fun for the early developers who are identified really young as being fast and strong, when you only have space in your club for them, you're not going to win. You're not going to own any podium. It's just not going to happen. And so it's just looking at, I always say, has everyone improved? And do you like soccer at the end more at the end of the season than you did at the beginning? And if not everyone improved and then not everyone enjoys it more at the end of the season, coaches have failed. They really have. And that's a tough thing to say because these are all really well-intended people who got into this because they care about kids and they love sport. And so I have a lot of patience with coaches who are busy professionals and families, whatever, and then they're doing this on top of everything. I do have patience if they're open to being reflective and if they're open to learning and receive coaching education. Because you don't want to lose and chase good people out of there for making mistakes. If you saw the way I taught and coached my first year, Erica, in 1998, you wouldn't have me on this podcast. But I reflected and I set the ego aside and I decided to take my soccer mentality where I was going to be a lifelong learner and continue to develop. And I decided I was going to take that to my professional capacity, which of course is what we want for these athletes, right? To transfer all the skills they learned from sport and apply them to their life. And I'm lucky that I was able to do that. I was never a star. And so academically, I was never the top. But then you mentioned that award at UVA at the beginning, which is a really big deal, and it was that mentality of being humble and being open to learning and setting what I thought aside and just trying something different. And so for me, I actually was listening to a podcast, Reform You Sport, and Anson Dorranson was on there. And I was kind of holding my breath because I remember when so many high school coaches went and started to treat their high school girls team like Anson Dorranson was treating the Chapel Hill team. I was like, no, these are the most competitive women in the world. Like, we do not treat our high school girls team like this. But then he said it shouldn't be any differential in playing time until ODP level. Mm. So this isn't even ECNL. I guess but it's like the regional team level at 14, 15. Now these are kids that are like all gunning for college, right? So if he is saying that, if he is playing his whole bench, if he is developing everyone with his 27 or whatever national championships, now that I've learned that, he subs 7 people at a time. You probably know this, Erica. I'm telling you, and changes the whole system. I mean, if Anson Dorranson's doing this at Chapel Hill, I think, Billy Bob down the street can do it with his, U14s.
Mm-hmm. Now, as far as his competitive cauldron culture, so I've seen coaches, high school coaches, club coaches try to execute it, but they can't do it like he does. Everyone tries, and he gives out his secrets because he knows that only he can implement that and be successful because, like you said, they're the most competitive and ferocious women soccer players in the country. So it's just like it's interesting, and I think coaches really need to just reflect and get creative on how they're providing that competitive environment, but making sure your players leave soccer or every single practice with a huge smile on their face, and they always want to come back and they look forward to training.
I'm telling you, positive, specific feedback, seeing every kid, telling them every night what they're doing well. It doesn't mean you don't get on them for what they're not doing well, but making sure that as we're giving the critical information to the kids, that we are highlighting what they're doing well so they feel seen and they feel that their effort is valued. And when we promote this, like I mean, I loved coaching high school soccer in Virginia with my friend Bill Ryder. He was amazing. And these girls would knock each other down, laugh in each other's face, and get up and laugh. And at the end, though, we would have them all like walk around and tell each person things they did really well each session. And it makes a difference, you know. My oldest is doing this little middle school team now, loves the coach so much. At the end of every game, the coach brings them in and they do positive affirmations where they pick a different, you can't say the same kid twice, and you go around and you tell someone what they did really, really well. Just that might be the only time these kids feel seen. And we think that every kid has it easy these days. They don't. There's so much pressure on kids to perform. It's not that they have it easy, and we need to stop thinking that our way was the best way, and all of this. And we need to, I always say, don't read Anson Dorranson's book, even though I really love that he was affirming what I've been saying for a decade in that podcast. I say, you're coaching that age, you're coaching 10U, you go find the best fourth grade teacher in your town and you buy that teacher a coffee and you ask that teacher how they motivate everyone and how they create a classroom environment where everyone cares for each other and why everyone loves going to that math class or that ELA class. And spend your time with an expert on kids that age, not so much an expert in soccer of kids 10 years older. Because the adolescent brain and the emotions and those beings are so far different than what's happened at college. It's a business. It's a completely different situation. We need to stop looking at practices there and then applying them down. Dorranson's going to be recruiting kids with a certain mentality, right? That like we're not going to find a whole team of that in our neighborhood or our town. We're just not.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I want to come back to what you said about positive specific feedback. And I saw someone talk about this the other week, and it's just so powerful because kids they don't really get that during the school day. They're constantly told what to do or criticized or sit in your chair or whatever, and they're not really like given that encouragement. And let's just give a few specific examples of positive specific feedback,
Sure.
and some things that can be said either from the coach or from the parent, in the car ride home from a
Sure.
game.
I love that. Okay, so I first want to quickly share a research study. It's probably 20 years old now, but it was pretty profound. And what happened was they observed and recorded statements of elementary phys ed teachers. Okay, and they were giving more positive feedback to girls, but the feedback was general. It was good job. Okay, it was nice try. And they were giving more skill specific feedback to boys. I need you to follow through a little bit harder there. I need you to face your target. I need you to have more force when you send the ball. What they found was skill variance was happening with boys and girls in PE before growth and maturation kicked in to account for skill variance. And one of the conclusions was it's because, I mean, the PE teachers are being kind. They're not being bad teachers. They know that girls drop out at higher rates of physical activity than boys. So they're trying to be supportive. But the reality is boys also drop out of physical activity at alarming rates once they hit age 12. Very alarming, just because it's not as much as girls. It's incredibly scary. And so the boys were able to hone their skills more proficiently than the girls. Now, again, I'm not judging these lovely teachers who are just trying to be kind, right? So, skill specific feedback examples are things like, um, I love how I saw an example of this actually somewhere this week, but I love how your first touch created space. That's that's legit. Or, okay, look, I love how you brought in your, like, let's say field hockey, because that's the world my kids love. Um, I love how your reverse hit was so consistent. Like, not that doesn't happen a lot at this age. I can tell you've been practicing.
Mm.
Okay, so now the kid feels seen, they feel validated. And what do you think they're going to do when they get home? They're probably going to go pick up their stick and keep practicing it, because we all like to do the things we're really good at. It's why math homework got done on the bus last minute on the way to school for me as a child, right? So we do the things that we feel pretty competent in. So if we reinforce that and then we say it in front of everyone and we get in the habit of complimenting all the players and each other. And that's why I feel like this positive affirmation that's happening on one of my kids' teams right now is so powerful. Um, so those are some examples. With the car ride home, this is the other thing. Parents shouldn't say a word on the ride home. Parents should say, I love to watch you play on the car ride home. No, I don't think so. Like, what if you didn't? What if your kid didn't try? Again, I'm not so warm and fuzzy that I don't have expectations. If you do your best for your team, not because it's about my ego, I don't care what you do, right? Like, you are responsible for you. As my husband loves to say, he's like, your actions are not a reflection of me, buddy. So, like, this is on you. I love to say, and I believe I got this from my friend Sarah, who played lacrosse at Cornell, and she went to college with my husband, and she owns a lacrosse club in Florida. Um, Maniacs, Lax
Mhm.
Maniacs. And she would say, like, their hashtag is heart and hustle,
Mm.
heart and hustle. And I love that. So I say to the kids before they play sports, I say, I can't wait to watch your heart on display and see you hustle. Then they get in the car. And if I saw heart and hustle, I say, I really loved the heart and hustle I saw today. And if I didn't see heart and hustle, I don't say anything. I don't say I love to watch you play. I don't say I love heart and hustle. They might say to me, Mom, what do you think? And I say, what do you want? Like a sandwich? That's two positives, one corrective. They're like, yeah, give me a sandwich. And so I'll say, okay, you did this really well. You did this really well. But you really do need to come to the ball harder, buddy, if you want to keep, if you want to keep progressing. Okay, thanks. It's simple. There's no berating. There's no whatever. But they know what the sandwich is. They know to ask for it. They know what heart and hustle looks like. Some kids, you need to define that, right? Like, heart means, like, you track back on defense. Even if you're so tired after that run back, you ask for a sub, because you showing your team respect needing a sub is far greater than you not making that run back because you selfishly want to stay in the field.
Mm.
Teaching them these things, kids don't, they, I as, my Cassie, who's 10, he didn't play soccer a lot. And so they put her on defense in her field hockey tournament recently. And someone said, get goal side. She had no idea. She had no idea what that meant, that term. So just making sure that the kids know these terms that we're saying to them, or at the very least, her coaches are so great. Let she feel safe to say, take her mouth guard and go, I don't know what you mean, and the coach to then say and teach her. So to teach them, be explicit, define it, but the more positive, specific feedback, just not good try, that doesn't really tell them a whole lot.
I think you might have changed my mind on the "I love to see you play" thing, because I was like, "Okay, well, that sounds nice. I can see that." But then when you say, "Oh, well, if they didn't try hard or they didn't give an effort, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, but it doesn't have to turn into this big thing in the car ride home. It could just be like, "Hey, like, here's what I saw, and it's over in 5 seconds." It doesn't need to be the whole car ride home where, you're constantly like criticizing or berating, none of that. But you don't have to always be like, "Oh, like everything's great." Like, so
Yeah,
I like that. I really like that a lot.
I really like it too, because mine, are they just didn't quite grasp like what it means to try. They're being raised to be really kind children. They weren't going out there for blood. Like, they're not naturally really competitive. Competitiveness can also be taught. I'll argue
Mhm.
anybody any day, twice on Sunday about that. You can teach it. It just might take a little bit. Again, this is why we don't over favor our early developers or those who are being bribed with goals or things like that, because some kids aren't, like some of us don't want to do those things, and so it might take a little longer for them to learn what it means. um for mine, it has to be like, come to the ball. When there's two people going for the ball, you get the ball. That's what we mean by competitive. Or if you lose possession, you're helping your team regain it. That's being competitive. Not
Yeah.
watching, staying engaged. These are all things that define what that looks like.
Mhm.
So I think it really works. And then again, yeah, it's keeping perspective. I heard this beautiful analogy the other day. When you're so narrow in your thought, you're like looking through a toilet paper roll. And so something small like a bad effort from your kid in a game can seem like a bigger deal. And this person said, like, I just never say anything or make any big decisions when I know that I'm kind of looking through a toilet paper roll. And I said, what a
Yeah.
great rule for parents for sport.
I like that a lot. Wow, man, everyone's getting so much insight in this conversation. I love it. Now, we talked a lot about on the mental, the emotional side of sports, but let's talk about physical literacy. Not a lot of people know what this means, and I know you've done extensive work in this area. You've worked with school boards. Do you work with sport organizations, or is it just more the education side and physical, like PE classes?
Yeah, no, I mean, some of my clients have been the International Olympic Committee, United World Wrestling, the Asso- Association of Summer Olympic International Federations, the Summer Games group, and um, so to define physical literacy, it is the competence and confidence to be physically active in a wide variety of environments to benefit self, others, and your community. So I'll say that again because it's a mouthful, but it's the competence. So competence leads to confidence. But here's the kicker: competence can be perceived. You don't even have to actually be competent yet. You can just perceive yourself. It's why confidence is always queen, right? Soccer queen. We're not going to say confidence is king. So it's the competence that leads to confidence. When you feel, I said, we like to do the things we feel good at. So that's where the motivation comes in. So competence and confidence and that leads to motivation to be physically active in a wide variety of environments to benefit self, others, and your community. So, a couple things there. If you're going to be competent enough to have confidence to be motivated to be active in a wide variety of environments, they mean land, snow, ice, and water. Okay. When they say a wide variety of environments, you need to be exposed to different things. And this is where the early specialization critique often comes in. So, like, the and again, this is just an anecdote, but like, I'm never going to let them listen to this. My kids are not the best swimmers. We do swim team for 6 weeks in the summer. The kids who are around their skill level quit because they're at the bottom, right? They're on their swim team are year-round swimmers. They're not going to compete with those kids. But I'm like, this isn't about competing with those kids. This is about when you're 45, being like mom and hopping in a triathlon and having a blast and being and just feeling empowered. And so putting our kids in situations where they can be beginners in things is so beneficial to them. So I'm not saying their swimming transfers over to their favorite sport. I don't even care, right? But it's about them being a beginner and being humble and being okay with not being the best, because a lot of we Erica, the numbers of the early developers of the really talented kids that quit early are shocking. Like, you
Mm.
wouldn't think they would, right? Because it's kind of like everything's handed to them, but then the second it isn't, a lot of them bail.
That's interesting. That's
Mhm.
interesting. Do you have the specific numbers? Because I have never heard that before, but it makes a lot of sense.
I can find it. I remember reading the research from Dr. Colin Higgs out of Canada. He was at Memorial University, and he was really involved in the physical literacy movement in Canada. And it was pretty profound. Like, really, really surprised me. Um, but then when you really think about it, like, we all can probably talk about the kids that you want that balance where it's not handed. People shouldn't be given all this extra handouts just because they're born like super fast or they're a real early developer, but you want them to continue to develop and be as successful as they can. And the reality is we want to give them some challenges so that they can fully reach their potential, right? Um, so the physical literacy piece is uh, it's interesting. If you're doing one sport all the time, there's not a lot of room to develop your a love of mountain biking or snowboarding or do the summer swim team. So these are just decisions that each family needs to really think about. I've seen amazing kids, well-rounded kids do one sport year round from a very, very young age, love it, be great students, dabble in another sport, and be okay with not knowing how to snowboard and those things. And it's a privileged thing to go snowboarding for a week a year. So just the more we can expose kids to different things and have them be beginners. Like one of mine can ride a unicycle now, because they're so comfortable with being a beginner that they actually enjoy the learning. I hope I answered
I,
that question, Erica. I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just a huge fan of as much variety as possible. And I loved when you sent me the snowboarding pictures of the girls on the mountain and the videos. Like everyone was just crushing it. And I'm like, wow, that's just so fun. And they're just such great athletes. And it's so cool for them to experience that environment and to just really develop new muscles and new corners of their brain. It's just so amazing to see. And I know with your daughters, you're really big on getting them into all these activities. And I just really noticed that when I met you and met the girls in person. And I want you to share like some of the things that you're doing as a mom with your girls, because all of your girls play sports. You have three of them, some young ones, and they're just fantastic. So what are some of the things that you're doing to just ensure that they just love all of these activities?
Well, I try to check in with them, and I tell them again, it is privilege, and we need to like really acknowledge that they get to do these field hockey tournaments, and I mean it costs money, and there's not a ton of teams like ice hockey. We do chill league. We never leave this area. We never travel for it. Everything's close to home. Field hockey, they do a little more. They're more dedicated to field hockey, and we do permit them to do some of these tournaments. But there's investment in them in terms of we're like, are you loving this? Is this what you really want to do? If so, like you want to show us that you're grateful for it, and then like we met we they get to talk to you. They both of them, they got very specific feedback like your skills are outstanding, but your speed is not, and they have great endurance, but genetically, and we joke with them, we're like, you're not going to be the fastest because daddy and I aren't the fastest and it's genetic. And but we also said, speed can be improved, but I didn't want, some guy who doesn't understand adolescent girl growth and maturation. Not that there couldn't be a guy who really gets that and be wonderful at it, but I really wanted someone who would see the whole picture and understand the purpose is, I mean, an age appropriate. I mean, their sessions are 10 minutes, right? It's age appropriate. They have fun doing it. They have a wonderful role model. And the coach's feedback was, this is an area you need to improve. And so they're like, we want to get faster. And so I check in with them. If I need to chase them down for things, this isn't something they're going to get to do. They do this little online skill stuff that they really want to do. It's not expensive at all and it's phenomenal. And they send them feedback. And I check in with them and I'm like, do you want to keep doing this? And they're like, oh, yes, we love that. So I'm mindful of not overscheduling them. They have a lot of downtime, but at the same time, we as people, adults, need to honor the fact that um, the kids are not like running around outside grabbing the neighbors to play laser tag every day, like we might have, or kick the can in my day. Um, and so, what is the alternative to some of these activities? Well, mine don't have phones, but it could be sitting and scrolling. So you want to find that balance. You want to check in with them. Is this too much? Would you rather be on the next team down and not travel? because that's okay with us. Like we say those things to the kids. Like we don't care, like the teams are color coded. We said we don't care if you're on purple, there is no not even a purple team. Or if you're on this color, which is the top team. Like we love you the same. Like you need to communicate with us and so give them some agency to drive that train. But as a family, I mean, yeah, we love mountain biking, we love snowboarding, we love running. And now that they're older and can do these things with us, we're really excited.
That's awesome, and I love the checking in, and I think parents sometimes might be afraid to ask that question because they're like, "Well, what if they don't love this sport anymore?" Like, what if that does happen? What should a parent do? Because sometimes they just lose motivation or they just don't have the drive to do the sport that maybe the parent wants them to do. What would you say to that?
Yeah, we joke because our kids don't do the sports that we did. So we feel like we did at least we either did something really well or really bad. Like we either coached them out of our sport or we were so open to them finding what they loved. One day one of them was watching the sister at ice hockey practice. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. She said, "I want to quit dance and join ice hockey."
Wow.
And I
I
said,
didn't know that.
"Yeah."
That's so great.
Kathy said that, and I said, "Of course you can." Like I don't, and they know we don't care what they do. But if they're going to do something, they do need to, there needs to be some ownership, right? Like some people say to me, how do you, your kids will do stick work. Like, how do you get them to do that? I'm like, I don't get them to do that. Like, they know that if they want to do these tournaments, like 10 minutes a day is not a big ask. It's just not a big ask. And if they're fighting me on it, then they clearly don't like it as much as they're letting on that they like it. So I think that that's okay. They always switched, like every season they did different sports as they're getting older, and I'm seeing this passion for field hockey. They're doing it multiple seasons, but they're supplementing it with some chill stuff, and
Mhm.
I'm checking in with them. They know we don't care what they do. We often say like there's a chance you will do cross country and track and field when you're in high school, and that's also totally fine with us. Like we don't care. Um, but you will do two things in high school because you are a member of your school community and you should contribute to the school environment and the culture of the school. So we do let them know, like you don't get to say you're coming home and going on the couch. Like
Mhm.
you're going to do something because of how physical activity positively enhances our well-being. You're more patient, you sleep better, I mean all of these things are the why. And we also share that.
Mhm. And, that's just something I've seen in your girls, and they've just really taken initiative with their development, with their stick skills, their speed, their strength, and that's just been so cool to see, like them just driving this bus. I'll get messages, from Scotty, and she's like, "Hey, like, is it okay if I do the workout tomorrow?" And she's just like over communicative, and I love that. Like she's like thinking about, like the program and like my schedule, but she's also just being proactive and really just trying to organize herself. And that's just a skill that's gonna stay with her even after this all ends, and it just makes my heart so happy to just see. I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, like, she's so
Yeah,
great."
it is great. And like they, sometimes if they're behind for whatever reason, even the little lesson to say, like, just own it. Don't make an excuse for it.
Yeah.
Just communicate that. And she's learning that there's a caring adult on the other side who's
Mm,
not going to scold her. It goes back to, when they're little and they forget their cleats or they forget their library book. And as parents, we want to go save them. But what we need to do so that they don't develop unnecessary levels of anxiety for small things is just let them have a natural consequence of it.
yes. I
And
love
know,
natural consequences.
and just
Yeah.
know the librarian is just going to say, try to remember it next time, come up with a system. Maybe you need to say, like, hey, Scotty, you were on top of all this and Cassie got them in. So I know you can do this. And it's just going to be another positive adult, not coming from me. You know,
Mhm.
and so we are so grateful to have found you, because even the other day, Jim, my husband, said something like, we just need to get Erica to ask Sky to do this, because Sky do anything for Erica. It was like cleaning her room or something. And I joked, he goes, you text her? I go, no, I'm not going to text her and bother her. But he was like,
We'll
you
put
just
it
need,
in the program, do chores times 100 reps.
yeah. But
Oh,
even
that's funny.
with the speed and strength is, even little gains, it's kind of like swimming. And this comes to what we know about goal orientation theory and task motivational climate. Success is and ought to be defined as doing your best or doing better than you ever did before. And so while you can compare it to others, and sometimes that there's a place for that, and that can be really fun, when you see your performance increasing, that is really motivating and really fun.
Yeah. That's so true, and it's I think comparison can be used to fuel us, but when we also, like, compare us versus us against us, and we see those small wins, we're just like, "Yes, like, we can do it. We've done it before. We can do it again," even if it's just incremental and it's just compounding over time, and that's the beauty of all this stuff, performance training, mental skills training, and just all these things that we're teaching kids. It's just such a journey, and it's such a process, but it's super fun, and I absolutely love what you're doing, Amanda. And I want my audience to connect with you and to follow you and to check out your website and
Uh,
hopefully your book that's coming out soon. So where can everyone find you?
just at Move Live Learn on Twitter, and at Move Live Learn on Instagram. And I used to be so much better about all that, but just I was using that a lot to grow my company when I founded it 12 years ago. And I'm so blessed that now I don't need, now the work comes. So when those relationships, again, it is all about relationships, come, that's where. But, and then the website is just movelivelearn.com. So,
Awesome. So, guys, be sure to check all of that in the caption below and just check in on Amanda, DM her if you have questions. Open door policy for all my guests, I'm assuming. Great. But, Amanda, thank you again. This was an amazing conversation. And thanks so much for sharing all of your wisdom.
thank you for everything you do for so many deserving young female athletes, Erica.
Thank you.